Hello and welcome. My name is Dr. Rizwan Qureshi and I'm one of the consultants working here in Sydney, Australia in emergency medicine. And today I'm going to reflect on my 20 years being here overseas. I moved initially to the UK after completing my medical education, an internship and a first year as a resident in Karachi, Pakistan. In UK, I spent about 3 years doing my MRCS exam, and finally I did my second migration in which I moved over here in Australia. And this journey has been very influential on my life, and I would like to reflect some of those influences for other junior doctors. So what led to my decision of moving overseas? My decision was very biased. I used to see my consultants who were Western qualified, especially in the UK, had a very good bedside mannerism. They had a very nice persona, and somehow they seemed to be more financially better off compared to their local counterpart. And such was my understanding. So when it came to my choices, obviously it was a very straightforward decision, most likely UK, to complete my medical training and education. But 20 years later, did my expectation meet the reality? Let's discuss it. I'm going to break out this discussion in 4 key areas: training, professional growth and development, financial independence, and also lifestyle. And you might be pleasantly surprised with the results. A little disclaimer, all of these experiences are my own experiences, but I think the overall context of this talk would be relevant to most people who are considering overseas medical training, especially here in the Western countries. First, the training. The training in the Western countries is very linear. You enter into the training pathway and then you exit out of a training pathway, most likely as a consultant. Throughout your training, you are well supported by the hospital, by your department, and also college has got oversight. They tend to govern you by work-based assessment, they tend to govern you by exams, and they also tend to support you. There's also other thing which I like about the Western medical system is that throughout your training, you have gotten easy access to all the courses at your levels, which I think makes a huge difference when it comes to learning the practical skills which are relevant for your own job and for your own training. Back home in Pakistan, I remember there were not many courses available, and also the courses which were governed, they were governed by College and Physician Surgeons of Pakistan. They were very few and they were very expensive for junior doctors to afford. The conferences at that time, in my time that is, were mostly and largely sponsored by pharmaceutical and had very little value when it come to the training requirements or the learning opportunities for junior medical officers. So I don't think the courses and the conferences over here in Pakistan were at that time much geared towards a junior medical officer. Also in the training pathway, I think the choices were fairly limited. You tend to focus on a hospital or a training environment which are very well equipped. They're supported by a large number of consultants who are very well qualified, and the hospital and departments which are very resourceful. They've got a large number of trainees, so you can easily pass your fellowship exam. That was the goal of the entire training program at that time. And don't get me wrong, it is a very important part of your training, but I think training is more than just passing the fellowship exam. It's also about building a personality as a more mature doctor, and you need to have a whole system supporting you through that process. But one thing I like about the training in the Pakistani or third world country system is that you train by volume. The amount of cases that you see, the number of procedures that you do on daily basis are just enormous, and you learn by sheer volume. I remember this one time when I was working as an ICU registrar, one of the ICU consultants who was Indian qualified said to me, "Rizwan, when I moved to Australia, I could do any of the intensive care procedure regardless of its complexity with my eyes closed. It was not that I moved here to learn the procedure. It was more so when not to do the procedures and what's the holistic care of the patient management." So I think in this point, I'm going to give medical training over here in Western countries a big +1, because training over here right from the very beginning is very well structured, very well organized, supported, and obviously ensures better opportunities when it comes to training the major tertiary center, but also even the rural center. It's not unusual in the Western system for the registrar to finish the fellowship exam and be unable to find the consultant level position. They have to move regional or even rural areas. The competition gets even more tough when you're looking at certain niche specialties like cardiology or certain fields of surgery or even in medicine. Home compared in Pakistan, I remember that a resident level job in a government sector, it would be classified as a permanent job as long as you are progressing well in your career in terms of passing the exam. And if you're a fellow, if you completed your fellowship exam and you've been hired as a government employee, that resident level job will seamlessly progress into a registrar and then a junior consultant, and then an assistant professor and a professor, obviously depending on your performances within all that time. Also in Pakistan, when you're working as a consultant or specialist in your field, there are a lot more opportunities to establish a private setup. It is easier to establish a private clinic, or it's easier to work in the private setup because there's a lot more hospitals in that area. In Australia, however, it is not easy. Because first of all, there are not many private universities and there are not many private hospitals. And I think from that point of view, the professional growth and development over here is fairly limited, especially for IMG. So if you're looking for a long-term plan, then be ready that depending on area of specialties, you may be stuck here of very junior grade for a very long time, unless and until you're able to move and displace your family to more rural and regional areas. So in this professional growth and development, I would say that Pakistan or overseas system seems to be better. Third up is the financial independence. In Australia, even the junior doctors are able to afford a house, able to afford a car, reasonable lifestyle with the blend of good local and overseas holidays. That first of all, the job provides a reasonable amount of income, but however, you do find that you get taxed very heavily, between 35 to about 40%. And even though you may be able to get a mortgage for your house, which is a loan, and mortgage for your car, you might not be able to sustain a very good quality of life. And so you'd find most of the doctors working here in Australia or in the UK, both wife and husband are working to afford that quality of lifestyle. However, I must emphasize the life here in Western countries is very expensive, and you may have to move to the periphery to be able to afford a better lifestyle. It is often said here in Western countries, the people living over here are asset rich. That means that they have got more of their resources of income tied up in their house or in their car or in their other investments, but they're not very cash flow rich. And I think that's true for most of the people who are living and working here in the Western countries. Compared to that in Pakistan, I think the junior doctors over there really struggle. They're not able to afford a house, a car, or even a better education for their children. Even if you tax adjust the salaries of the junior doctors over there in Pakistan or other third world country are very poor. And I think that is one of the prime reason, in addition to the better level of training, that the doctor would like to move to the Western countries to be able to provide for their families and support their parents back home in their country of origin. So I think from that point of view, financial independence definitely takes a big plus. Finally, a lifestyle. You come here overseas leaving a lot behind. You leave your culture, your religion, your language, your loved ones, everything. Trade-offs are big, and soon you realize that once a migrant, always a migrant, once an IMG, always an IMG. And you tend to long that deficiency over the period of years, especially when you're raising your family. Your children would speak English as their first mother tongue, and Urdu or whatever the native language of Bangladesh or Hindi or Punjabi or Tamil it might be as their second language. And you may also realize that as they're growing up, their values are often different, despite the fact that you're teaching them adequately. So you need to realize that when you come and live here for years on ends and decades, then you will lose a part of your own identity in that process. Maybe not so much for you, but for your family. And that to me is a huge trade-off. Lifestyle over here is very mechanized. You're working here, you're working very, very hard. And I think it creates a very high level of anxiety and frustration and even a burnout. Especially if your wife or your partner is also working, then you'll feel that both of you are constantly on the work. The children are in the childcare, and then you get access to your children only on weekends. And some of the husbands and wife are even working on weekends. So this is, again, as I said, is a huge trade-off, and it's not to everybody's liking. Overall, what is my conclusion? After 20 years, I've realized the training over here in Western countries is excellent. It also depends upon your level of eagerness and your level of commitment. The system cannot train you if you're not interested. There are opportunities to encourage all the young doctors to be able to go outside, see the world, meet different people, and work in different systems and try learn the best for them. The second advice I would give to the young doctors is, after you complete your training, try go back to your own home countries as soon as you can. And it's not only going to help the people living over there, but also it's going to have a better outcome in terms of your real professional development, in terms of making a difference. And let me be very honest, it's often said that, oh, money is not very good over there and you'd be struggling to make the end meet. I don't think it's entirely true. When you go back into your own country, I think you need to give yourself some time, and you need to have a certain level of business prospect. Treat your work as your business. With the business, you will create more opportunities, not only for you, but also you'll employ other people, which will help provide growth and sustainability for your own work. That can be very easily done back home in Pakistan or wherever the country of origin is, because the overheads in terms of establishing up your own business are not as high as establishing your business over here. I think it's a good conversation. It will give you some valuable insight in terms of making your own decision. And I'd like to end this conversation on a beautiful poetry from Urdu language. तलाश रिस्क का मरहला अजब है कि हम, तलाश रिस्क का मरहला अजब है कि हम घरों से दूर भी घर के लिए बसे हुए हैं. I hope you like this conversation. Thank you very much. Look after yourself. Khuda Hafiz.